This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
And this is the debut podcast of the new year. This is the first one in 2024. It's episode number 134.
Why is that? That's a thing. Like, it's not intimidating. It's just like the first of the year. I hope I say something, that is meaningful that will help people get their year started off good.
I hope so too. I set my intention for that, and I'm still not going to let go of the notion that you say inspiring and uplifting things every episode, and we don't need to wait until the odometer rolls over to the next 1,000 miles to celebrate it.
I'm just taking it. Any compliment or good thing that comes, I'm taking it. So, yeah. I think that every episode is like a first on the road to amazing.
I was looking through the list of them, and in their own ways, they're all gems. They all have something really wonderful to offer up. And I sometimes randomly go back and listen through an episode or part of an episode and go, hey, that was an interesting way of putting that. And other times saying, am I still saying that?
We both have our thing about, what we're looking at, and I'll look at mine. And the one thing that has been such a struggle for me to get out of is that everything is not a series. Like, I think it's series. So what did we do last week? We need to do this. We need to do second part, third part. Everything in my life goes like that. And these are standalones. Right?
There's the magic in the New Thought teaching. They're all a standalone because they start with the same premise, which is that there's only one.
Yes.
So what we do is 134 episodes of talking about the one. And it's just different perspectives. So it's not like the one is going to turn into this and we get to talk about it and it's going to turn into something. It's still the one. We're looking at it from the different vantage point.
Yeah, I hear you. You have no idea how long it took me to understand. I heard it, like intellectually I get it, but how does that really, But I get it now because I'd have these notes and I have to pick up from where we left off last week. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working like that. And, I do some things with folks, and one person, they calls me the professor. Like, all right, here comes the professor. She is and it's a joke and everybody laughs at me and I'm not laughing because I'm thinking, this is orderly. This is coordinated. But then looking at it standalone, it's more fun, because you don't know what you're going to hear that will just make your world better. And it will, whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's true of every episode. And I was just going to suggest that at the end of the episode, you just briefly write down any open questions that you think were left during the episode. Because to me, that would be the interesting list, because that's more about you than it is about what we've talked about. And see which things keep on showing up on the open topics list.
By the way, I am trying to grow out of that. Thank you very much. I'm trying to be more spontaneous and just flowing as opposed to, okay, let us make sure that we have everything covered. Oh, we didn't do that. Let's do that. Make sure somebody might have a question. that somebody may not show up for 3 weeks. It's like you don't have a classroom, and people are here because they want to be here, not because they
Yeah,
have
well, I
to
mean,
be.
that's your ability to be completely detail oriented and to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks is wonderful. And it is the controlling nature which you have given up of being completely panicky that something's going to. that you're still paying attention to what's going, but you're not wrapped around the axle about it. This is my observation, having being 134 episodes in with you.
Well, it sounds good to me. Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
hope,
that
I
ties
think,
together with what you want the episode to be about, what you want to talk about this week.
yeah, creating your own reality,
Right.
and kind of understanding what control really means when you have control. And I think it's an art or a skill. May not be the best way to put it, but it feels like an art or a skill. Knowing when to give up. And we can't. I don't think you can go through this life just sleep, just letting things happen. But setting intention and then knowing when to release and let spirit and all the universal laws in the ecosystem, the divine ecosystem, do the work.
Yeah. And there is, when we want to create something, when we want something in our reality, our experience that's different than what we've been having, our egoic self says, well, let me go out and get the pieces, the raw materials, and put in some sweat and some labor and some effort and maybe some struggle and force those pieces together and then get what I want. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that seems to work. And that reinforces our thought that we have to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's not what's going on. And that's not what we're doing when we're creating our new reality. The first thing that happens when we're creating our new reality is we get an understanding of what our previous reality, our current reality has been, and then get an idea of what we want to have instead. That's the pivot. And more, I'm becoming aware that the pivot is crucial. That's the crucial step. If we're looking in the rearview mirror to see about the road that we've been on that has sucked so far, we're not paying any attention to where we're going. We just have that naive assumption that we have to continue following the same road. And we might miss the side street or the fork or the exit ramp or the bridge out sign or whatever it is that's coming in our direction. So what we want to do is stop paying attention to what has been and extrapolating the future from that and say, what do I want to have instead? Mm-hmm. And then set the intention for that. And there might be something for us to do. There might be some actions for us to take. There might be some steps for us to be involved in. If I want to meet a loving, wonderful partner to spend the rest of my life with, I can set my intention for that. And if I do that while I am living in a hermit's cabin on top of a very tall mountain where nobody ever comes around, mm-hmm. I may need to change something just so I come in contact with anybody who could be a possible relationship. If I continue to avoid people, then I'm probably not taking my own side. Now, I don't need to go down to the village and choose the person and choose the whatever it's going to be and then make it all happen myself. But I do need to put myself in a position where the good that I'm seeking can find me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And first, let me just, because that was kind of a lot right there.
Uh-huh. That's why I stopped talking. I've learned.
You're catching yourself. I told you, you know all this stuff, so it just kind of rolls off, right? But when you said the pivot is the hardest part, I'm not sure if you used that term hardest, but
it's the crucial part, yeah.
The crucial part. It really, really is. Because what you're saying is I'm letting go of what I'm used to doing. And I'm calling, now this is me giving my interpretation. Okay, so I'm certainly using my own words, but, and I'm letting go of what I'm used to doing. And I am putting this faith in motion, using words I used this very day earlier, the faith that I tell other people to have. I have to use this. There's another crucial moment or part of the pivot that you know what? The universe can really handle this. I don't, but do I have to do this? And you say no. And the universe makes it happen. But letting go of control and making that decision, that moment of decision is so hard, going against everything you've done in your life. Some of it's worked, most of it hasn't, really.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it hasn't. But starting something new, a new way, that's crazy difficult.
Yeah. Well, let me run something else past you, which may or may not be true, but it's certainly an interesting perspective. I often, as you have noted, say the answer is always yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what we get to do is work out the question. And we're very enthusiastic about the answer is always yes. The universe says yes. And that's ascribing a lot of human emotion to the universe always saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible that the universe is saying yes like a disinterested employee at a government agency, where they go, yeah, whatever, and they stamp yes on it.
Mm-hmm.
Non-attachment. There's no pom-poms. There's no energy about it. It's like, oh, that's what you want? Yes.
So is that correct?
The universe does not have any skin in the game. If there were something that the infinite creative power that creates everything, that knows everything, that does everything, that is everything wanted, would you be able to stand in the way of that? Come on.
No.
All right. So the universe is perfectly okay with the yes being to whatever it is that you are inviting into experience.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that the infinite doesn't want to have happen, it can't. It is an impossibility. You want to flap your arms and fly? Give it a try. It's probably not going to work until enough changes that works. But right now, I've tried. It doesn't work. I'm not even going to flap now to demonstrate that it doesn't work. Trust me, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. But are you not saying that the universe does, in fact, have a will or preference? Because if the universe doesn't want it, it doesn't work. So it's not like a blanket yes.
There are natural laws. There are, and we call them the laws of physics. Those are the ones we have scientifically proven, demonstrated. We start out with an observation, then it turns into a hypothesis, and then there's an experiment, and then a proof, and then it becomes a principle. And it becomes a principle because once we've distilled it down to this is what that natural law is, it always works the same way. Speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, always doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
Except when it gets close to a black hole, it looks like it does change. And does that mean that we were wrong? No, it just means that we never did the measurements near a black hole. For all we knew, this principle applied always. And principles apply always. And then at some point, we get an understanding, oh, there's something a little deeper going on here. Thermodynamics and gravitation and electricity and all of the fundamental forces of nature that we have come to understand and be able to define. There's the theory of relativity, but then there's the theory of special relativity because there's an exception, there's an asterisk. There's different ways of looking at it. And even though our knowledge is incomplete, we can still work with it. We can still make things happen.
So how about this? And I really am glad to hear that. So how about this? For those of us who struggle one way to get it done, or it's supposed to do this, until we thoroughly, completely slam ourselves against the wall and then relinquish, sort of like just throw your hands up because you have no choice and allow the universe, whatever, to work, those principles and laws and everything to work. How about you stop before you get to the place of utter exhaustion? And, I use John 3:16, not John 3:16, John 16:13, where Jesus talks about show me. And those are words I lift out, show me. So I am more inclined to just stop before I'm just so thoroughly exhausted and beat the heck up and say,
Good for you.
but I'm talking about experience here, right? Because I could take a lot until I just said, I think this is crazy. I'm just so exhausted, so hurt. I can't do anymore. How about I stop short of that?
And
say,
that, in my opinion, that is perfectly reasonable. And I'm going to go even a little further in on that. I'm going to go all in on that one. Okay. Is when we have an idea that there's been something in our experience that we don't like, and we do the pivot, and we have an understanding of what it is that we do like, we don't have to work on it until it feels like a struggle and then let it go. We can let it go immediately.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it takes some practice.
Yeah, especially if we think that controlling it has served us well. And especially if our ego says, "Oh, you gotta muscle this one for a while before you surrender it to an infinite creative power that can create anything."
Yeah, like I hear those words that you say, infinite creative power that creates everything. So, I have to, what I've done this year, can you imagine how many years it's been before I finally just did this? Just make these stickers, and just put it on my computer. Infinite creative power that creates everything. So if I'm doing a pivot, my history or my subconscious or whatever says, you don't be a lazy bum. You do what you can, do the best you can, and you participate, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, I'm not participating as much as I used to. Because that has not worked well for me. I might have to struggle not to, but I would prefer not to struggle not to participate to the level that I used to than to try to pick myself up from being battered and bruised in a war that I'm losing. That's awful analogy, but it is.
Well, I know what you're talking about. And if you found yourself battered and bruised and getting done with the struggle, and that's familiar, and you think that you have to get to that point before you surrender it, then that infinite file clerk is going to stamp it with a yes and go, okay, whatever. or you can turn in your paperwork before the struggle and you get the same yes.
Yeah, listen, Carol can last about 3 years, okay? She can go about 3 years. So, yes, and let's just come back, in 3 years, we'll pick her up and fix it all. I am so done.
Let's take a quick break, and when we continue, we will talk some more about creating your reality. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at bethelight.com. That's b-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at bethelight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
We're talking about creating your own reality. And you ever have chicken for dinner?
I used to.
Okay.
And
I'll use chicken because it works. And even people who are vegetarians or vegans can understand what it is. So you're having chicken for dinner. And that's nice. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to have the chicken for dinner. It is much more significant to you, or much less significant to you than it is to the chicken. it's kind of the same balance, but even bigger when it's the difference between what we're experiencing and what the infinite is experiencing.
Mhm.
For us, it's the whole enchilada, and for the infinite, it's, chicken.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Seeing it from, we say through God's eyes and God's point of view, so much is poetic, seeing it through God's eyes. But now getting that real, really doing it, it's that story you just told.
Yeah. And seeing it through God's eyes, I mean, we have so much judgment about the people who are misbehaving and the politicians who are being corrupt and the they, whoever we're othering about them being different or unworthy or undeserving. We are all divine expressions of one infinite presence. And the judgment that we have is our own. And the preferences for how we want to live is our own. So when we're looking at somebody who is behaving in a way that we find unacceptable, there might be the knee-jerk reaction. I want them to stop doing that. I want them to behave differently. We very rarely say, I want this all to work out so that I wind up being happy and they wind up being happy and everybody is experiencing love, because we think that we know how it ought to happen. So very few people get up first thing in the morning and say, let me screw up the world today. Let me see what I can do to make other people unhappy, to make people in my workplace miserable, and otherwise cause chaos in the world. Very few people actually do that. There are a few sociopaths who probably do, but most people get up with the idea that they're going to do something uplifting and helpful and good to support the people who are important to them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's roll with that and say, okay, what could that mean for me? If I'm creating my own reality and this person or this behavior is showing up in it, what does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity. I was thinking, as you were saying, it was describing a situation I had with my older son recently, and he was talking about, somebody, and I said, and he was, quite upset because it just seemed like they could see this. It's just whatever. And I said, now, what if you looked at it through the eyes of God? What would you see then? And he looked at me and said, now that's a different story. So we always have that choice to look at it through your own eyes. You use the term ego.
Yeah.
You do that, or if you look through the eyes of God, which is the eyes of love, what does love see? And it sees somebody that perhaps what you're looking at is a result of some other stuff behind it. Love gives you better vision.
Mm.
You're still seeing something that's a little off in your opinion. But when you see the stuff behind it, it's not like the person is crazy. It's things that have happened. And what's the love response to that? And so that was like 3 days ago. And he called me this morning and he's just talking about that. He said, I just don't know why I didn't see that. I said, well, it takes a little practice. So that infinite creative power that creates everything, the recognition part of the prayer is I've always felt like, don't rush, sit with that for a while. Just sit with that for a while. I know we want to get on with the prayer. Okay, so get on with the prayer, but maybe during your meditation, you could just sit with the first part a little bit. Or while you're driving, just kind of hang into the first part and see how that feels, because in crunch time, it doesn't come like that. It has to kind of be a reflex that you're accustomed to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when we turn our eyes or turn our attention toward the infinite, the more practice we have in doing that, the easier it is to do, especially when it's under times of duress.
Yeah, and that there's another thing that you say. Turn your attention. Turn away from. You're so used, I keep saying it, you are so used to this. you just turn your attention, right? Some of us have to say, like, now what does that mean? Okay, from this to exactly what? This? Okay, is that legit?
Well, you touched on it a little bit before when you're talking about looking at something through the eyes of God. And when we decide that we want to look at this unpleasant situation for the eyes of God, and what do we see? And if what we see is targets that we would prefer shooting lightning bolts at, that's not about God. That's about us and our ego. So that's an indicator, okay, I'm not looking at this from that high perspective. I'm not looking at this through the eyes of love. And being able to start off our practical prayer by turning our attention to that infinite power and presence, that creator that creates everything, puts us in a position of partnership and humility. Because the divine power and presence that creates everything that has created me, and that power is indwelling. Well, I know I don't have the power myself to make galaxies. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
But if it's the same power that's inside of me and it's accessible to me, then all of that good is available to me somehow, even though I don't necessarily know how. So I completely agree with you that the recognition step, the first step in a practical prayer, is hugely important. I also know that they're all important. I have, throughout the time of my study, gone through all 7 of the steps. Actually, number 5 and number 6, or I'm sorry, 4 and 6 are very similar. The affirmation and the reaffirmation, if we have any doubt. I spent a fair amount of time just working on doubt. How do I work with the doubt that I have? When something comes up that's outside of my belief system, then what do I do? That unification step, after I've done my recognition of that infinite creative power, that power is in me. That power is available to me now. That's a really powerful step to be involved in. And sometimes people just being able to open to that, to our divinity, is really powerful. Affirmations, the self-help community has put those all in their own category. You know, you can do affirmations. You don't need to do the rest of them as far as they're concerned. And as I said, that works right up until it stops working. There are entire spiritual practices based on the second to last step, which is gratitude. And the final one is release. Yeah.
So it's hard to say that one is more important than the other. And I'm say this and might be different next conversation, but the recognition piece is so important.
Oh, yeah.
Because it kind of sets the understanding that I don't mean this, but you know what I mean. God is and I'm not, right? God is. There is God. Now we can go from there, but let's understand God. And quick story, I was out with some girlfriends, and one has had stent, whatever you put in your arm to get what is it? Dialysis.
Yep.
She's had it in her arm.
Yeah.
She's had it in her arm since 2016. So this is like 2024.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. And like she's blah, blah, the whole story. And suddenly she went, and her kidneys that were functioning at one level went, and they were suddenly 2% up. Like she's going better. And she's sitting there and she's talking all this death stuff, and she would get a dog. But if she dies, her sister would have the dog, and the dog would end up in a pound. And I'm sitting there at the restaurant probably looking much like this. And I said, okay, so this God because you go to church every Sunday, right? Yes. So this God that you go to church to worship, that raised your level of kidney function beyond any expectation, couldn't figure out how to take care of a dog if something should happen to you. Now, since you haven't died yet, and like she's been near death, you haven't died yet. You seem to be moving away from death. God is good. God wants good. What about the poor dog that would love to be with you during this time? Because she's an excellent dog mommy. Gosh. And I said, what about the poor dog that would love to be with you? That's a God thing. my sister wouldn't take care. Your sister don't know. She is not in the equation of good
Right.
here, right?
Yeah, good dog mommies tend to attract other good dog mommies into their orbit. And if there's a need for somebody to take care of the dog, oh, this was Stell's dog. Got
For
it.
real. Yeah. I
Or
said,
have
listen,
3 or 4 of them fighting about it. I can imagine if she got a dog, it'd be a Great Dane.
if it was a Dane, honey, you wouldn't have to worry. I got
That's right. You got it. You got it.
you. So 2 days afterwards, she sent me a note that says, look like there's going to be a dog in my picture. And I'm thinking, was difficult for you because it's all around that recognition piece. Now, I may fall off somewhere else, but God is, he said God is able. So this is like no big thing.
Yep. Yep. And that's a lot of ways is the last step is the release. Like, I'm going to turn this over to that infinite creative power that creates everything. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let it go. I don't need to plant a seed in the ground and then dig it up 3 days later to make sure it's germinating. That's not my job, and it actually doesn't help. So set the intention for the perfect dog to be showing up in my life, and either I'll be adopting a dog in 3 days, or there will be a stray that wanders by, or the next door neighbor will move in with 3 dogs. And suddenly I have a surplus of dogs without having to actually take care of one full time.
And you say it's with such ease and grace. Like you get to the release part and you let it go. I don't want to deal with it. I get there and say, look, I am thoroughly, completely exhausted. You got this, I'm out.
Okay.
We don't want to get that far, right? I'm trying to learn.
My favorite magical phrase, which is up until now. That's
up until now. Thank you so much.
And as soon as you're ready, you can start doing it differently, and then you can report back and say, oh, that was easy.
Okay.
No, that was...
I'm going to hold you to that because, I tell myself, you're taking away from your life all this energy and, just let it go, girl. Go watch a show. Do something.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, and I know this because I've known you for a while, is you're pretty good at making things happen. And you have a nice reputation for making things happen. And just sitting by and letting things happen without you having to work at it, you lose part of the challenge. Now, it might be as much fun in a different manner, but there's something that lights your fire a little bit about being able to face a challenge and muscle through it.
Maybe
I know because I know how to do it too, and I'm good at it. And at some point, I get to, and I don't deal with this. The infant's going to have to take care of this. I look forward to seeing how God is going to solve this problem.
Well, I want to get to that point. I want to get to that point before there's nothing left, right? Because I'm like, I cannot do this any longer. So, it's like knowing when it's okay to let go. And you're saying it's okay to let go from the beginning.
Yeah. Let's take another break and then do a prayer on creating our own reality calmly, peacefully, and gracefully.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione. This has been great.
A wonderful conversation talking about creating your own reality. And what we've noticed is that we are always creating our own reality. And sometimes we do it calmly and gracefully and gently, peacefully. And sometimes we struggle and muscle it and get weary and beaten up and dragged through the whatever it is we're getting dragged through. And then at some point, if we're in that process and we haven't claimed victory while we're struggling, because sometimes it works, then we get to let it go. And letting it go, we are able to turn it over to the infinite and partner with that infinite creative power that has created everything to create this newness. That's the prayer today. It's about creating our own reality calmly, peacefully, gracefully, in partnership with that infinite creative power. And we start with the acknowledgement that, yes, I can generally understand what the situation is, and I can generally figure out how to put the pieces together, and then I can generally work pretty hard and maneuver to get the pieces together and get the project, the job, the task, the assignment done. And history and time and experience have shown me that as often as not, I do that, and I can do that effectively. And also tell me from time to time that that's a lot of work, it's a lot of struggle, it can be exhausting. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I get to the end of my rope and it's not done. I'm not having the experience that I want. I am not having the success that I have intended. And I'm out of stuff. Energy and ideas and thoughts, and I'm depleted. And sometimes it takes us getting to that point to realize that there is something bigger than we are. There is one. There is one divine power and presence, one infinite creative force that creates everything. We call it God, we call it the Big Bang, we call it nature or spirit or whatever we want to call that divine force that in the beginning was all there was and began sharing itself as its creation. Everything is that one presence shared in its own way. The same story comes from physics and the Big Bang or Genesis and let there be light. Only one light, only one bang, and everything unfolding and evolving and revealing itself from that one. So we can all trace our lineage back to that one. We are all that one expressed in our unique and individualized and personal way, as is everyone and everything. So knowing that divine power and presence abides within, as we set the intention, as we get the idea of that next experience that we are desiring, that we are opening to, that we are inviting into our lives. We don't have to muscle it. We don't have to figure it out all on our own. There's an infinite intelligence that knows how to fit the pieces together. There is a limitless creative power that has the ability to fit pieces together in a far more subtle and forceful and powerful and uplifting and magnificent way than we ever could. There is one limitless love that is sharing itself through all of its creation, including us, including this new experience, ready to reform and reshape and reassemble to bring that newness into experience. And I know it's possible for that newness to come into our lives calmly, peacefully, gracefully. There's no need for struggle. There's no need for effort. There's no need to feel depleted or overcome. There's no need to battle or compete. There's no need to force or cajole or maneuver. There's only the opportunity to turn it over to that infinite creative power that creates everything, to get our small selves out of the way, to be in that state of grace, and calm and peace, to relax and allow that infinite presence to reveal itself, that divine power to channel through us and through everything that's around us, to bring that newness into being. And the good unfolds. The law always says yes. Sometimes with a grand fanfare, and sometimes with a subtle shrug of the shoulders. Yes, this good is underway now. And the good unfolds for us and for everyone involved. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the awareness of the creative process. I'm grateful for the understanding of when it is ours to take on and when it is ours to turn over, and how we can more fully participate in bringing that newness into our lives. And the universe is saying yes, and the good is unfolding. And I'm so, so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the awareness of the process. I'm grateful for the divine light that is shining for and through and as each one within the sound of my voice. So with this deep feeling of thanks, I speak this word and I release it into that creative law, that same law that creates everything. And I know without any question, doubt, hesitation whatsoever that it is now creating this. The good is at hand. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.